The night of the blooming ceremony was supposed to be the proudest moment of Leora Ashwood's life. For weeks, the pack elders had prepared the great hall with silver candles and white flowers, the traditional symbols of a young Omega's first shift. Every eye in Vale Hollow would be watching her step into the circle of stones and call her wolf forward for the very first time. It was meant to be a celebration. Instead, it became the night everything fell apart. Leora stood at the center of the circle, her white ceremonial dress trembling slightly in the cold air. She closed her eyes, just as her mother had taught her before she passed away 3 years earlier. She reached inside herself, searching for the wolf she had always been told lived beneath her skin, waiting patiently to be called. Nothing happened. She tried again, pressing her hands together, whispering the old words under her breath. The crowd began to murmur. She could feel Dara's eyes on her from the front row, her stepmother's lips curled into the faintest, cruelest smile. Beside Dara stood Celine, her stepsister, dressed in gold, clearly hoping for exactly this outcome. "She's omegaless," someone whispered. "Wolfless, weak." The words spread through the hall like fire through dry grass. Leora opened her eyes, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She looked at the elders, silently begging them to give her more time, but their expressions had already hardened into judgment. "The girl carries no wolf," the head elder announced, his voice heavy with disappointment. "She cannot be recognized as a true Omega of this pack." Dara rose gracefully from her seat, feigning sorrow, though her eyes glittered with satisfaction. "It pains me to say this," she said, loud enough for the whole hall to hear, "but a wolfless Omega cannot remain among us. For the safety and honor of this pack, she must be cast out." No one objected, no one dared. Within the hour, Leora was stripped of her family name, her ceremonial dress replaced with a plain traveling cloak, and led to the edge of the territory by 2 guards who would not meet her eyes. The gates of Vale Hollow closed behind her with a heavy, final sound. She walked alone into the darkness, the cold biting through her cloak, her heart aching with a grief she could not yet name. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears never softened Dara's heart, and there was no one left to see them anyway. The forbidden wilds stretched for miles beyond the pack borders, a lawless stretch of land where exiled shifters and rankless wanderers went to disappear. Leora walked for 3 days before she found the small border town of Ashgrove, tucked just outside the territory ruled by the Alpha King himself. There, she took a room above a tavern in exchange for scrubbing floors and serving drinks, and she gave herself a new name, Lyra. Just Lyra, no family, no pack, no past worth mentioning. She kept her head down. She learned to smile politely at strangers and to disappear into corners when trouble started. Some nights she lay awake, wondering if her wolf had truly abandoned her, or if something else had happened that night in the circle of stones. She had felt something, hadn't she? A flicker, deep inside her chest, like a candle struggling against wind, but it had never been enough. Months passed. Word eventually reached even the quiet town of Ashgrove that King Cale Draven, ruler of all the packs, had grown desperate. His court whispered that an ancient curse hung over his bloodline. His wolf had never once knelt before another creature, not even in the sacred bonding trials, meant to reveal a true mate. Every noble Omega presented to him had failed. The king was said to be short-tempered, cold, and utterly without patience for failure. To end the curse and secure his line, Cale issued a royal decree. Every unmated Omega within the kingdom, regardless of rank, pack, or standing, was to appear before him for testing. Refusal was not permitted. Leora's hands shook when she heard the decree read aloud in the tavern square. She was no longer recognized as an Omega of any pack. Perhaps she could hide. Perhaps no one would notice a servant girl in a border town. But someone did notice. 2 of the king's soldiers arrived in Ashgrove 3 days later, carrying a list of names gathered from every territory, including those cast out. Leora's real name, buried in old pack records, had not been erased after all. When the soldiers found her wiping down tables in the tavern, she felt her stomach drop. "Leora Ashwood," one of them said, reading from a scroll, "you are ordered to appear before King Cale Draven for the mate testing." "There must be a mistake," she said quickly. "I'm not an Omega of any pack. I was cast out. I have no wolf." The soldier did not look up from his scroll. The king's decree makes no exceptions. Come with us. She had no choice. Resistance meant punishment, and running meant worse. She untied her apron with trembling fingers and followed them out into the cold morning light, her heart pounding with dread rather than hope. The journey to the king's castle took 2 full days. Leora spent most of it in silence, staring out at the passing hills, trying to prepare herself for the humiliation she was certain awaited her. She imagined the court laughing when her name was called. She imagined Dara and Celine somewhere in that crowd, delighted to watch her fail all over again, this time before the most powerful man in the kingdom. When they finally arrived, she was given a plain grey dress and led into a grand hall, filled with more nobility than she had ever seen in her life. Rows of Omegas stood waiting, each dressed in fine silks, each hoping to be chosen. Leora felt impossibly out of place among them, a servant girl standing where princesses and daughters of powerful packs had gathered. Near the front of the hall, she spotted Dara and Celine. Celine wore a deep red gown, clearly chosen to catch the king's eye. Dara stood proudly beside her, whispering encouragement. Neither of them noticed Leora standing far in the back, her head lowered, her heart hammering. One by one, names were called. Each Omega stepped forward, faced the king and waited for his wolf's reaction. Each time, nothing happened. The king's expression grew colder and more distant with every failure, his patience visibly wearing thin. Then Celine's name was called. She stepped forward with practiced grace, offering a deep bow. King Kale barely looked at her. His wolf, visible only as a shift in his eyes and posture, remained utterly unmoved. Celine returned to her seat, humiliated, but trying to hide it behind a forced smile. Finally, near the very end of the long list, a guard called out, "Leora Ashwood." The hall fell silent, whispers rippled through the crowd. Dara's head snapped up, her face draining of color. Celine turned pale as well, clearly recognizing the name she thought had disappeared forever. Leora stepped forward on unsteady legs, her eyes fixed on the floor. She stopped a respectful distance from the throne and lifted her gaze at last, prepared for rejection. King Kale Draven looked down at her, his expression unreadable. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through people. For a moment, nothing happened, just as it had with every Omega before her. Then something shifted. The king's breath caught. His eyes widened slightly, and before anyone could understand what was happening, he sank slowly to one knee before her, his wolf's presence bending in a way no one in that hall had ever witnessed. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Nobles rose from their seats. Dara's mouth fell open in shock. Kale rose quickly, clearly startled by his own reaction, his jaw tightening as he tried to regain his composure. "This is not possible," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "She's a wolfless Omega," Dara called out suddenly, unable to stay silent. "She was cast out of our pack for failing her blooming ceremony." "There must be some error," the court murmured in agreement, unwilling to believe what they had just witnessed. Kale's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting between Leora and Dara. "If there is doubt," he said finally, his voice steady and commanding, "then we will settle it the old way. She will undergo the bonding trial." The bonding trial was ancient and rarely used, reserved for moments when a true mate's identity needed confirmation beyond doubt. It required both parties to stand within a circle of sacred stones and allow their wolves to reach for one another freely, without hesitation or fear. If they were not true mates, nothing would happen. If they were, the connection would reveal itself completely, undeniable to anyone watching. Leora trembled as she was led into the circle that evening, the same kind of stones that had witnessed her failure months earlier. She feared history would repeat itself, that she would stand there feeling nothing, while the king's wolf remained silent, proving Dara right in front of the entire court. Kale stepped into the circle across from her, his expression calm but his eyes searching hers carefully. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "only for her. I will not blame you for what your wolf chooses to do." His words surprised her. No one had ever spoken to her with such gentleness, especially not someone of his rank. She nodded, unable to trust her voice, and closed her eyes. This time, She did not force herself to search for her wolf, she simply let go, releasing the fear and shame she had carried for months, and in that stillness, she felt it again, that same flicker from the night of her failed ceremony, except now, it did not struggle against the wind. It rose gently, warmly, meeting something powerful reaching back toward it. A soft golden light spread across the circle of stones, wrapping around both of them. The crowd gathered outside the circle gasped as one, watching the unmistakable glow of a true bond forming before their eyes. Leora opened her eyes to find Kale watching her with an expression she had never seen on him before, something between wonder and relief. "Your wolf isn't weak," he said softly. "It never was." Later that night, the kingdom's oldest healer, a woman who had studied ancient bloodlines for decades, explained what had truly happened. Leora's lineage carried a rare and nearly forgotten trait, one where the wolf did not shift outwardly during the blooming ceremony, but instead bonded on a deeper, spiritual level, one that could only be revealed through true mate recognition. It was not weakness, it was rarity, so uncommon that most packs had forgotten it existed at all. Further questioning revealed something even darker. A servant who had once worked under Dara confessed, trembling, that years earlier, Dara had used a forbidden suppressing herb during Leora's ceremony, deliberately hiding her true nature out of jealousy and fear that Leora's rare bloodline might one day surpass her own daughter's standing. The court's mood shifted entirely. Nobles who had mocked Leora hours earlier now looked at her with a mixture of guilt and astonishment. Dara was stripped of her title on the spot, her crimes against a rightful pack heir considered a serious offense under royal law. Celine, though not directly responsible, lost her position as well, the family's name disgraced beyond recovery. Leora was formally restored to her birthright, recognized not just as a true Omega, but as the last surviving heir of a bloodline long thought extinct. The very people who had once whispered that she was cursed now bowed their heads in her presence, ashamed of how quickly they had turned against her. In the weeks that followed, Leora slowly adjusted to her new life within the castle. She was cautious at first, half expecting the world to shift beneath her again, to strip away this sudden kindness the way it had stripped away everything else. But Kale was patient with her, never once demanding gratitude or affection, simply offering steady presence and quiet respect. They spent evenings walking through the castle gardens, where Kale told her about the loneliness of ruling without a partner who understood him, and Leora shared memories of her mother, the only person who had ever truly believed in her before that terrible night. Slowly, carefully, trust grew between them, built not on grand gestures but on small moments of honesty. On the day of her coronation as Luna, Leora stood once again in a hall filled with nobles, just as she had on the night of her exile. But this time, there was no fear in her chest, no trembling in her hands. She wore a deep blue gown embroidered with silver thread, chosen not to please anyone but herself. As the crown was placed upon her head, she looked out across the sea of faces, the very same court that had once called her weak and wolfless. One by one, they knelt, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect for the strength she had carried quietly all along. Kale stood beside her, taking her hand gently in his. "They see you now," he said, "the way I saw you from the very first moment." Leora smiled, feeling something settle deep within her chest, something whole and unshaken for the first time in her life. She thought of the girl who had walked alone into the forbidden wilds, certain she was broken beyond repair, and she silently thanked her for surviving long enough to reach this moment. The kingdom of Ver Hollow would remember that night for generations, not as the story of a king who found his mate, but as the story of a girl once cast aside, who rose to become the very heart of the kingdom that had rejected her, proving that true strength often hides quietly beneath the surface, waiting patiently for the right moment to be seen.